Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Gary Campopiano. Thank you for coming this afternoon. We're happy to see you here. There's a few things I'd like to announce before introducing our guest this afternoon. I'd like to first of all thank all of our volunteers, especially the committee that puts the shows together, puts the receptions together, arranges for the gallery talks such as this afternoon. And I'd also like to thank some of you in the audience that I know are hosts at our gallery. Thank you for committing to that obligation. We couldn't keep the gallery open without you. I'd also like to announce that we have opportunities for any of you that are not currently volunteering at the Arts Center. We have a table in the back with some literature about our organization, about the gallery site here, and applications to become volunteers. So you might want to take a look at that. This afternoon we have Manuel Unzueta here with us.
Turn off so my friends don't call me. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
This is the second exhibit that Manuel has offered to curate for us. In 2007 we had the original Caminos show, and it was such a success we asked Manuel back again this year to curate Caminos 2. For this exhibit, he'll tell you a lot more about it, but he selected some artists from Santa Barbara and the Carpinteria area, many of whom are having their first opportunity to exhibit in a legitimate gallery space. Manuel, I believe, was born in Mexico, grew up in Texas and then Santa Barbara. He earned a bachelor's degree and then a master's degree in fine art in painting at UCSB. I'd just like to tell you what a couple of publications and people have said about Manuel. Manuel's exemplary commitment to education and community service has been a beacon of hope and inspiration for thousands of students through his lectures in the Santa Barbara Public Schools, at Santa Barbara City College, and at UCSB. The countless volunteer hours he has given to support community public art projects have added a distinct cultural flavor to our neighborhoods. And this appeared in the Independent newspaper in Santa Barbara. I also found online a site I wasn't even aware of, but this is a site where students have an opportunity to evaluate their professors at Santa Barbara City College. So I pulled this one. Professor Unzueta is the last of a generation of scholarly instructors who actually grants, through lectures, quizzes, and outside projects, personal development incentives to his students. Manuel is a well-known Santa Barbara muralist, artist, and lecturer at Santa Barbara City College Chicano Studies program. Manuel Unzueta.
Thank you very much. Okay, let me pull this out. Okay. Testing, test. Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, I have to use the microphone because we have something to record. And I could speak loud enough, but I don't mind holding the microphone. Thank you. Yes, I stopped teaching just last semester after 34 years at City College. And I did it for 13 years at UC Santa Barbara. But that's only part of the dimension of the things that I like to do, for many reasons that I'll explain to you. Okay? Can you hear me now? Okay. So maybe you can put it a little louder in there so that in case I get too messy in here. So that's one area that I had no choice to learn how to do many things. And I'll explain to you later on why. Coming into Santa Barbara at the age of 13 and not speaking the language, even though I grew up parts of El Paso, I realized that coming to Santa Barbara, it was full of opportunities. So I saw it very early that the only way was for me to move on to many things, and I always knew that I had to go to school and do many things in order to survive in the United States. So I had a rock and roll band. That's how I paid my education. I used to play soccer for about 11 years. I used to write speeches for some of the politicians in Santa Barbara when I was only in the 12th grade. So all these things, I never realized that these things are important, but I never thought art, my drawings, would be that important for you to be here, okay? So my first one-man show was at Santa Barbara High School. I did a series of drawings that blew everybody's minds. I did all these pen and inks with influenced by Delacroix, the Romantics, these European artists, Goya and Siqueiros and Orozco. So because of that, they made me feel that art is important. And I want that for our artists, that they know that art is important. So I ended up in France and Spain with a scholarship, and I said, wow, this is exciting. So I'm gonna stick around this. And eventually that's what I did, all the way to my Masters of Fine Arts at UC Santa Barbara in Mexican and Chicano art that I'll explain to you eventually. I'm sure many of you in here, to a little background, you said, okay, we hear these things, Latin American, Mexican, Mexican-American, Hispano, Hispanic. Have you heard that? Mm-hmm. So I'm sure you ask your Latino friends, if you want to use that word too, say, what's going on in here? How do all these people express themselves through their art? Let's say the pictorial way. So I'm not going to speak just out of the tip of my tongue. I have traveled throughout the Southwest for over 30 years, all the way from San Francisco to Houston. I have gone to Iowa, Minnesota, wherever I could see how people of Latino or Mexican background express themselves through the arts, because I found it very exciting. And of course, I noticed other cultural trends. Therefore, I've been doing research on this constantly. So I have become an advisor for several companies when it comes to how to deal with Latino workers, because they don't know sometimes what the difference is. Okay, so therefore, this exhibition, okay, what this exhibition is showing to us in Carpinteria. What is it that we can pick up and be educated about beyond the art, if we may? Because you can see the art with your eyes, but actually we listen to the art through our ears. Mexican art. Being a Mexican artist, for me, is a danger to say I'm a Mexican artist in the United States of America. And that is, if I am a Mexican artist 100%, and I only pay Mexican teams, and I am concerned 100% with my Mexicanismo, then I am considered a foreigner. I am considered a person that comes from another country, and eventually many people think, well, are you going to go back someday? So many Mexican artists that they left a stamp in the United States of America, of course, were the great muralists, Rivera, Orozco, Siqueiros, and eventually Tamayo, and the great Frida Kahlo. But they went back to Mexico, because that's where their art initiated. Those artists from Mexico that come into the United States to do different types of art, they would like to stay here because of being paid with dollars, but eventually their art is Mexican, whatever that might be. Pre-Columbian images, colonial landscapes, revolutionary imagery, okay? Social situations of Mexico that many artists have become very well known. And Mexico is, of course, is a mecca of artists, especially is the #1 country with female artists in the world. Because it's a country that lends itself to it. But Mexico is many Mexicos, okay? There's an Indian Mexico, native Mexico. There is a colonial Mexico, cities that you can visit and say, oh my God, this is very colonial. There's modern Mexico. There's northern Mexico, where I grew up. And we have, of course, you know, the new immigration of people from different parts of working class people looking for a better opportunity. The imagery for Mexican people, those that accept to be Mexican artists 100%, is because they are going to do those things for restaurants, they are going to have exhibitions, and sometimes they don't understand why the Anglo population or the American population does not understand it. They think that you're just going to go and buy it and that's it. You just give me $500 and that's it. No, no. You have to educate the public. Socially, it has been a controversial issue that I've been discussing for over 25 years. Being Mexican 100%, socially speaking, in the United States of America, we become very invisible. Mexican families, if I may, in Carpinteria, that they claim with their ethnic pride that they are Mexican 100%, they're not going to speak the English language. They're not going to vote. They're not going to try to become citizens. They would know how to help their kids with their homework because they say, I am Mexican. Is that clear? I'm sure that you have heard Viva Mexico and you can hear all these screams and everything. Hey, that's fine. That is fine that we know we are Mexican. But eventually, we have to find out that we are in another country. Remember, there's about 12 to 13 million people of Mexican descent in the United States of America. Okay, that's just Mexican people. I would say that observing a lot of research from El Paso, Texas, all the way to San Francisco, Colorado, and other parts, I would say that about 65% identify their expression, their taste as being Mexican. The food, the music, the movies, soccer, etc., etc. Out of that population of the rest are young Mexican people that are coming into the United States and they want to bring something more modern. They identify with modern music in the United States, with a new generation of actors and actresses that are bringing a different expression, and that could make maybe just about 10%. And I would say that a very small percentage of people of Mexican descent are beginning to say, oh, I'm going to stay in this country, I better start doing something about it. Even though I already have a restaurant, I have 3 restaurants, but I'm still very, very Mexican, but my kids are no more Mexican. They don't speak Spanish anymore. So the generational change begins to happen in every Mexican house. Therefore, if you see a painting by Diego Rivera, by Frida Kahlo, Jose Luis Cuevas, Rufino Tamayo, and I can go on and on, it's expression south of the border. They came to the United States and they left a great legacy. Santa Barbara is very lucky. We have the only standing mural by David Alfaro Siqueiros at the Santa Barbara Museum of Art, a great muralist. Here in the Santa Barbara Cemetery, we have the murals of Alfredo Ramos Martinez, that you can see them there in the Santa Barbara Cemetery. At UC Santa Barbara, we have the drawings, like murals by Federico Cantú. And of course, there's many collectors in Santa Barbara that they have a lot of Mexican art. Do I make myself clear? Socially and in expression, we need to realize that it's a great expression, but socially, as you can see, you don't see a lot of Mexican families here. You don't see them here. Because they want to make sure that there's a Mexican band in here. They want to feel welcome. They want to feel that, oh my God, I don't know if I should go there. But those of you of Mexican American descent or Mexican descent, we are here because we have already our 2nd and 3rd generation of people being educated. Okay, so I'm sure there's several of you in here. Or maybe you have a relationship with a Mexican culture. I'm sure that you know some people here in Carpinteria that have restaurants and you know, they sell strictly Mexican culture, music, food, posters, calendars. But it's the most present minority art in the southwest of the United States of America, for obvious reasons. This used to be Mexico before 1848. And when a lot of these people say, well, you know, we're going to a place called California, Nuevo Mexico, Colorado, Montaña, should be Montana. Montaña, man, that means that I'm going home. How many Mexican pieces do we have there? We're going to try to figure that out in a little while. Mexican Americans. Mexican Americans are people that insist, with a lot of rights, I am American first, Mexican second. Because I was born in the United States of America, or I grew up in the United States of America, I don't speak Spanish anymore. I never been to Mexico. I don't speak Spanish. I don't know about that culture. I know about the United States of America, even though my last name might be Perez or Sanchez or Gonzalez. They might change it to Perez, Gonzalez, or Sanchez. Okay? So that it sounds more anglicized. What kind of expression do we see from the Mexican American people that decided to stay in these countries after 1848 and became Mexican Americans? It was really bad to be a person of Mexican descent for about 100 years in this country because there were no rights. And Mexican people felt so easy to go back to Mexico and come back again, different from other minorities. Therefore, Mexican Americans in the 1950s, 40s, 50s, they tell them, please let go of your culture. Listen, we Anglos do that. When we come into this country, we let go of Scotland and Wales, we let go of Brittany, and we become Americans. It says, you know, even many Americans, kids, they don't even know what their heritage is. It's because they are American first. Therefore, Mexican Americans are trying to find something after the GI Bill, after the Second World War. Many Mexican Americans that went to war and they fought side by side with Anglos and African Americans and Asian Americans. They came and they were given a scholarship. And many chose to be artists. But at that time, 40s and 50s, they were influenced by American art, not Mexican art. Many of them were influenced by, eventually it's going to be Jackson Pollock, it's going to be Motherwell, it's going to be de Kooning, and all these names are from other countries because they also came from Europe. And they said, well, you know, I'm going to learn the American side of me. And the best known is Edward Chavez from Cimarrón, Nuevo Mexico. Edward Chavez went to New York and he yelled and screamed between 1958 all the way through the 1960s saying, no, I want to have an exhibition. Forget about the Chavez thing. Just call me Edward. Or just say Edward C. Because I don't want you to turn me into an ethnic artist. Okay? So, Edward Chavez, another person, Margaret Chavez from Texas, she got a scholarship to go to France. Same thing. She says, no, call me Margaret. I don't want you to turn me into an ethnic person simply because my last name is Chavez. I have a master's. I have had exhibitions in Paris and everything. You know what I'm saying? They are saying, I am an American first, like Jackson Pollock, like Motherwell, like Klein, etc. So they created what is called Mexican-American abstract expressionism up until the late 1960s. What is the challenge here is that they were not painting for the Mexican-American community or the Mexican community. They wanted to paint for America with a lot of challenges to be accepted. Still today in the United States, they give more space to a Mexican artist like Frida Kahlo, like Rufino Tamayo than Edward Chavez or Margaret Chavez or Jose Soto, those that were really Mexican Americans that they were invited to be Americans first. Speak English, learn everything, and you're a participant. And this is the opposite. If it is being a Mexican artist in the United States, culturally visible, but socially invisible, because of the non-participation in society, the Mexican American became socially visible, but culturally invisible. They did not want to be tagged. The best example in Santa Barbara, in the 1960s, they opened a place called La Mesa, where they built all kinds of houses, middle class in those days, and they want to experiment if Mexican Americans might apply for homes in there so that they can become Mexican Americans away from Haley Street, San Pascual Street. And yeah, many Mexican American families move into La Mesa. And if you see many of them from the 60s and the 70s, they wanted to blend with everybody else. I have family living there on my mother's side. Well, obviously, you know, they have green eyes and blonde hair, so they can really blend pretty good. But those who didn't, they have to really learn the language and do everything. That's why people sometimes ask me, okay, so why this Mexican art? Well, because it keeps on coming from Mexico, from different states. Embroidery, pottery, paintings, in the restaurants, the names of the restaurants, the music, the dancing, the events that have become part of this culture already, like Cinco de Mayo, 16th of September, Dia de los Muertos. Mexican-American celebrations are more subdued because, like I said again, the Mexican-American wants to blend in. And my family is an example, and I'm sure many of you got nephews and that they no longer speak Spanish. I mean, they no longer have nothing to do with Mexico. It's not their fault. I mean, it's their right to say, I am an American. But what's your last name? Bracamontes Gavilanes. Oh, wow, that sounds like that's very American. Oh yeah, but my first name is Edward. Okay. And that is something that you see in the high schools. Kids that just arrived from Mexico, and that generation is getting used to the school system, and by the time that they are trying to learn the culture, these kids that already came before, they have a little conflict of culture, but once they speak the language, they join everybody else, and they begin to have a little conflict with the new arrivals from Mexico. Because Mexicans are the only people that we recycle ourselves in the United States of America. No other minority does that. You don't see a lot of people coming from Africa anymore. You don't see a lot of people coming from Indonesia, especially Vietnam. So they faded away from Santa Barbara and went to San Jose, and their kids are becoming very, half-breeds, Asian and American. But us, by the time that I'm relaxing, that I'm accepted, I got to deal with a cousin of mine that just arrived, and he doesn't speak English. And by the time that he learns English, and he learns to come to things like this, another member of the family arrives. It never ends. That by now, most of our schools from Carpinteria to Paso Robles, I would say at least 50% of the schools are about 60 to 70% kids, from south of the border. Is that clear? Any questions about being a Mexican 100% in the United States and being a Mexican American? We still could say that Mexican Americans who don't speak Spanish anymore, that they have no contact with Mexico and they don't frequent Mexican things anymore, that we have quite of that in Carpinteria and Santa Barbara, I would say they only make about 15% of our population. They are not a great, because maybe the grandfather still speaks Spanish and maybe some newcomers are speaking Spanish in the family. But the biggest population still identifies with being Mexican, speaking the language, being very close to the culture. And you have no exception here in Carpinteria, in the flower industry, and the restaurant industry. And those that have done very well economically, that they feel they did it because of their hard work. Mexican Americans that I'm sure you know some last names here in Carpinteria that I know, when I run into them, they didn't speak Spanish anymore. They grew up in Carpinteria, they never spoke Spanish, and they are mixed marriage. Yeah, they are mixed marriage, okay? Therefore, how many of those pieces of there reflect that American first, Mexican heritage, or being American of Mexican descent? Latin American artists, by the way, if you ask a Mexican person where he is from, or even a Mexican American, they say Mexican. Because Mexican is a country that is isolated from everywhere else. We have a frontier with the United States and Guatemala, and it's a huge country. So Mexicanismo, Mexican is. But if you ask a person from Guatemala all the way to Argentina, especially in the United States, I am Latin American. And Latin American means I am somewhere from Guatemala to Argentina, but not Mexican, because Mexicans call themselves different. So I just had a party in my house the other night, and I invited people from Peru. I had a person from Uruguay, Guatemala, Costa Rica, and they kept on saying, we the Latinos, the Latinos, as being Latin Americans. But most of the Mexican people never use that word in that party. And the American guests kind of confused about it, okay? Therefore, I think that we have different expressions in the United States, especially a new generation of Mexican American kids that came very young or they grew up in here. They are teaching us new expressions. Like my two kids, they are better than me and expressing the American way in their music, and they're looking at everything and their electronic things, and there's some drawings of them in here. It is the right. They are American first, and eventually they are socially visible. But many Mexican families, like I told you, just symbolically speaking, they're not here to come and see an exhibition that is about them in many ways and not about them at all. So Caminos was to unite those trends. I have about 2 Latino artists there. Jose Villafuerte is half Ecuadoriano, and Joao Costa, that is a newcomer into Santa Barbara from Brazil. And he still does not identify with nothing in the United States. He's trying to get a feeling. But Jose Villafuerte is half Anglo, so he has this little conflict and try to decide what is his background, and he's bilingual, very good bilingual, English and Spanish. Why is Mexican expression so powerful? Because we cannot escape those tremendous images of Mexico, especially the painting that I have, the round one, that you can see later on. But my friends, if we have Mexican art, we already know that, south of the border, and some of them come into this country and they go back to Mexico, or if they stay, they are going to be strictly doing Mexican culture, like our restaurant owners in here. Our Mexican-American colleagues that are already in City Hall, or they have a restaurant and they deal with many different things that their kids have changed, that is their right. And the Latino Americanos, see, that's what they call themselves, from Colombia, from Costa Rica, from El Salvador, well, they are dealing with their own issues. And some of them have been very traumatic, like what happened to kids from El Salvador that arrived here in the late 80s with no parents, with nothing, and they went back to their countries totally transformed into mini monsters that they dominate the whole country with gangs and everything. However, we saw something very different. What happened to the people of Argentina? They were able to fit in right away, and eventually they faded into the crowd. Obviously because they were light-skinned, and they identify by being Latinos with Italian last names, and Basque and Spanish last names. Okay, but the reason that I'm standing in front of you is because in the late 60s, when I was working in a restaurant, I used to sell my drawings in that restaurant, and I said, well, you know, not bad. I get money to take my girlfriend to the movies. Wow, it's nice to have, you know, put gas in my car. Remember how much was a gallon of gas in 1968? I think it was 35 cents. It was nice to do that. We hear about neglect in the high schools. Many Mexican kids and Mexican American kids are being tracked into accepting the concept of welfare, working in menial jobs, minimum wages, like it happened to my father and some of my uncles. Okay, that's fine. But you know, my generation, we said, no, you know, I want to be more than that. We begin to hear that there's upheaval in the air. American students are beginning to protest about what's happening in the country. Especially white students are the ones that pay the price for change. Some of them get killed in Kent State, and some of them get hurt in San Francisco, etc. Then African Americans join in with a black movement. So of course, Mexican Americans and Mexicans couldn't stay behind. We begin to hear names like Cesar Chavez, that he believes that he can unionize the invisible farm workers. Then we hear about another organizer in Los Angeles, Bert Corona. He wants to the unions of workers in LA to have power. And in Texas and different people. So at my age, it was perfect. I get a visit to my house in 1969 and they say, are you happy with your job? No. I was making 90 cents an hour. I guess I was not very happy with it as a boss boy in those days. He says, would you like to be better? He says, okay, we are Chicanos. I say, yeah, I heard that word before in El Paso, Texas. Well, you believe that you can do better, but you're going to have to take risks and you're going to have to be active. Hey, sounds good to me. I had a lot of energy. So I joined the Chicano movement that invited me to be a Mexican person with pride because of my father and my mother and my tradition, but to accept my American responsibilities for education, to be involved politically, etc., etc. And I wanted to be the best that we wanted to be. And the Chicano movement came out of different states in California, and Texas, New Mexico, to get young Mexican Americans like myself, or Mexicans like myself, to aspire better. And they say, would you like to go to a university? I say, wow. When I used to go to UCSB, I thought it was a cemetery. It was so sad to go there because it was such a lonely place. I said, I don't know if I want to go there. Eventually, the Chicano movement of 1968 that brings alive Cinco de Mayo, Dia de los Muertos, to bring it into the streets. It's also a political movement to put pressure on our representatives for better schools, etc., etc. We also believe in a lot of research in universities. In fact, that's our strongest point, that we have now Chicano activists of different ages doing research, getting PhDs, master's degrees. Some of them were candidates for the Nobel Prize, like one of our writers here in Santa Barbara, Dr. Luis Leal, who died of 101 years, a great activist, etc., etc. It felt good for me to go to universities for about 6 years and run into a lot of progressive Mexican Americans that we knew. We could be in front of you speaking like this, or like Ricardo, my friend back there, or anyone else that have done very well in their lives as activists. Chicano art is a combination of Mexican expressionism, Mexican existentialism, Mexican realism, with American abstractions, with American progressive materials. And when you combine both of them, and you can make it powerful, like the great Luis Jimenez from El Paso, that he created great sculptures and vinyl and many things that he sold them, you know, for $500,000, is because he knew how to use the two concepts. But his sculptures were, he called them Chicano sculptures, because he had found that sense of expression. So for me, as a Chicano artist, it's very easy to pick up a Mexican theme, because the Chicano movement invited us to know about our culture. So I visited Mexico for 5 years to know everything about that culture of my parents, because I grew up by the border, which is a very Mexican-American attitude. And then we were invited to learn everything about the United States, where the funding is, proposal writing, getting grades, going for a master's degree, for a PhD, etc. It was really beautiful. But you know, many parts of society, they saw us as a threat. Because, you know, many people that were being invited to come from Mexico is because they wanted them to work in the fields, to work in construction, so they call them braceros. A bracero is a Mexican worker that works with his brazos, with his hands. They used to tell them in the 50s and 60s, we want your brazos, not your brains. The Chicano movement is the opposite. Okay? I want to use my brains and I want to fly. So the Chicano movement became an intellectual movement. 3 trends in Chicano art. There are Chicano artists that paint Mexicanismo. They are Mexican American, born in this country, they are Chicanos, and they do very well, like an artist that I'm waiting for, that he came to present a mural with us that we're working on. He's an excellent painter, but 90% of his work is Mexicanismo. That is, he wants to paint Emiliano Zapata, he wants to paint the Aztecs, and even if he paints a scene from El Paso, Texas, it still brings the Mexican flavor. So Mexicanismo is a great population of Mexican Americans painting themes from Mexico. And it's very accessible to get commissions for restaurants, to get commissions for people that have supported us with their homes to have one of our paintings if it is a Mexican theme. Another trend in Chicano art is what we call barrio art. And that is kids that are growing up in communities like Santa Barbara on the east side, East LA, the Mission District in San Francisco, the Segundo Barrio in El Paso, La Colonia in Oxnard. Well, I had a list of about 86 places where people really gather in there of Mexican descent, and they had their own expression. Therefore, these paintings are going to include tattoos. Okay, tattoos are very accessible to kids from the barrios where Mexican American people predominate, of low income. And we have a few pieces by one of our friends that is doing time behind bars and is an excellent artist. And that kind of art, within this Mexican-American art, it's part of that. And you know, there's other terms, but I just want to let you know that there's art being done by Mexican-American kids that have nothing to do with Mexico. They are more in this side of the border. And also to paint lowrider cars, you know, lowriders, and identify with the music of those times. Then we have another movement where the kids want to paint whatever comes to their mind, like dreams and frustrations that mix with poetry and different things that teachers know those things are happening with these kids and the schools. On the part that we are concerned, many of them have social issues to deal with, where the mother or the father might not be in the house, where gang attraction is a big option, where neglect is something that they didn't ask for, etc., etc. Okay, we have those issues in many of these places. But then we have Mexican-American Chicano suburbia, where people have good pieces of art in their good homes, because these Mexican Americans are educated, especially Santa Barbara, where we have a university with a lot of Latino teachers of different countries teaching in there, and are sympathetic non-Latinos that they like to get our art. Chicano art is an activist art to educate people if they don't know much about our culture. We also delve into political statements if that exhibition calls for political activism about the environment, about civil rights, and lately the most popular theme is immigration. The most popular theme amongst activists, Mexican and Chicano activists, is the concept of immigration, because it's quite a bit of our people, of our heritage, that they gotta deal with that issue. It's very emotional. So Caminos, when they asked me what should be the title, I said, well, you know, I think we gotta pick up a word. And let's make it simple. Caminos means paths, roads, but also it could mean many things. Path to inspiration and different things. Let's do that. Let's make it attractive to the non-Latino people as well. Because I said from the beginning, I doubt it, if many Mexican families are going to come. That's still not part of their generation to come to exhibitions like my generation. Eventually, my way of seeing Chicano art, because I used to go to East LA and I noticed how my friends painted. And by the way, there's a big Chicano art exhibition coming to the Museum of Art in Santa Paula. They have a great gallery now, and they are going to invite some of the best known Chicano artists, you know, people beyond their 40s all the way to their early 70s, and they are going to be showing their art from different collections, from movie stars and different people that they are going to lend some of this art, and I'm proud to be included in that, because Chicano art is the most spicy, the most exciting art of all Latinos and Mexican Americans and everything, because it has guts. We take the risk. We are willing to walk the walk, and we have a lot of sympathetic people, and those that might feel a little threatened by it, but it depends on the state of mind, because all we want is to make sure that those kids in Carpinteria High School, they go all the way for a master's degree. We want everybody to move ahead, because the Chicano movement in the last 30 years has become Chicano power, or the Chicano movement is education. And remember, the Chicano movement was different from the black movement, or the Asian movement, or the Native American movement. The black movement was based on the color of skin, and it was easy to identify with the movement. Native Americans was very obvious in specific parts of the United States, or Asian Americans, but us, we could not base it on color, because we Latinos and Mexicans, and we have different colors of skin. You wouldn't even know that some of them are even Mexican. Okay, we cannot base it on economic status, because many people have a lot of money and we're right in the middle. So for us, it's very hard to have a unity of political power, because some people feel that they are no longer of Mexican times when they were needy, and then we have those that have the needs. And those that say the best thing for me is to be non-visible, so I'm just going to fade away. I call 6 friends of mine in Carpinteria. I don't know, man, if I can make it, I don't know, I'm going to be busy. And I call another one. Well, Manuel, I got to take my kids to Disneyland. Oh, Manuel, call 6 of them. I don't see none of them in here. Okay, that is the progressive part of those Mexican Americans, that they no longer feel that their ethnicity should identify them. Have you heard about the word Hispano? In Spanish, it's okay. All those of us that have a last name from Spain, we are Hispanos because Hispania means Spain. But why is it that all of a sudden we hear in English Hispanic? Have you heard that word? A word that I don't care for because someone is having a panic? Hispanic? Just for the sake of, maybe you can spread the word around. Nothing against that if you want to call that way, okay. The word Hispanic was invented by the Nixon administration in 1972 through 1974 to invite Latinos who would not be Republicans or conservatives to come into the Republican Party. Because when he won in 72, he says, wait a minute, I only attracted like 15% of the Latino people, and the loser got more than me. So they told him, well, we have all these things in the country. He says, well, I want to form a committee. Why is it that Latinos are not voting for Republicans? And many issues came about, okay? Immigration and eventually Reagan comes with Reaganomics, and they insist that the word Hispanic should be used for everybody because they argue all people with a Spanish last name or Latinos, they need to accept that they are half European. We need to give them the welcome regardless of color of skin. Any person with a Spanish last name, they are half European. So let's use that to take away the liberalism and all this activism so that they can come into the Republican Party. One of those conferences was in Miami. And of course, many people in Miami, they accepted that term because many of them that escaped Cuba, they were what we call the white Cubans. So they identified with that term right away. But Puerto Ricans with African American background, they disagreed, and especially the Chicanos say, wait a minute, what am I going to do about my Aztec roots? What am I going to do about my way to help one another if you want me to be conservative? Whatever that could be the argument, but the issue is that in the 80s, Reagan renewed the term Hispanic in the forms for voting and everything, and they put, are you Hispanic? And that's it. Or are you white? Are you black? So many people have to put Hispanic, Hispanic, Hispanic. And the word became popular, not in the Southwest. In the Southwest, we insisted to keep on being activists for a better future. We insisted to fight for that, intellectually, spiritually. And what is that happens? Why is it that the word Hispanic becomes so popular? Because the administration, the Republican administrations, all the way to Mr. Bush the first, they sent millions and millions of dollars to the East Coast, to conservative Latinos, and they gave them television stations, radio stations. They gave them anything they wanted to kill the activism of the Latinos. So by 1990, people are using the word Hispanic, of course, because it was coming on the radio, it was coming on television, but everything that we were trying to achieve in the Southwest, they cut all the funds. I used to teach in 2 places, painting murals, and said, there's no more funding. What do you mean? Yeah. But in the East Coast, especially Florida, New Orleans, where there's a lot of people from South America, they gave them, so if you see the TV, not Telemundo, what's the other one? Univision. If you see Univision, you're going to see a very conservative attitude. And where did it come from? Someone had to give him millions of dollars because now it's a powerful. But then you have Telemundo and you have Televisa from Mexico that is more liberal. So my friends, I know that is a controversial issue. So here we don't have any Hispanic painting, okay? Because it doesn't exist, okay? There's no such thing like Hispanic art, okay? And Spanish is okay because Hispano means Spanish last name. But Hispanic was an invented word in order to make some changes that were not to the benefit of the people, at least in the southwest of the United States, Mexican Americans that consider themselves people of color, that want to be proud of their heritage, that want to consider painting, as you are going to see. If you go to the Museum of Latin American Art in LA, very close to the Museum of Tolerance, you're going to notice very Latin, but hardly any traces of an art that has that invitation to observe what's going on in this painting. What is that you're trying to say? By the way, Chicano art is the most popular right now. Movie stars are collecting it. Chich Marin, Paul Rodriguez, Mel Gibson, they are collecting Chicano art. With this expression of the streets of the United States where a Latino presence is there. Therefore, I find it very exciting. Like a fish with many gills and lungs. I love, if I pick up a Mexican theme, that's my choice. If I choose a very American, Mexican theme, that's my choice. I feel just as welcome, especially when I used to play music by the great bands of the Beatles, the Rolling Stones. Of course, that's the American side of me. Something that I love. If I choose to do something about Brazil, or if I choose to do something about other Latin people, it's my choice. In my house, we have meetings of people from different parts of Latin America that they are looking for leadership. And they have found the leadership in the Chicano movement. The most important organizations by Latinos, okay, if we want to put everybody together, the most active organizations are Chicano organizations. That we have representatives in Congress, we have people that are very involved in many things. And many people from Latin America, they have no unity. They still cannot find it because there's not too many of them. And many of them come with a little bit of prejudice from their country against the native, against the Afro, against the poor, and because many of them had cash. And it's very difficult for them to get involved in what the Chicano movement wants to say. So, Chicano art. In Santa Barbara, I have done about 24 mural projects with children, with different organizations, and here's Ricardo from Arts Alliance, where we invite youngsters to join us and feel proud of murals. I like to organize exhibitions. I like to do at least 3 a year, and I've been doing that since 1972. My murals in Santa Barbara, some of them are considered very well known. A copy of one of them is in the Smithsonian Institute. So, we know that it's historical. But I do not want to deny any single aspect of my freedom, whatever I want to express myself. I just don't want to be tracked. I don't want to be categorized. I'm going to do that myself. And that is what the Chicano movement tells us. I choose to be an American in my own choice, as long as nobody tries to violate that trust, because I'm friendly to everybody. I mean, my class at City College used to have 120 students once. People from Indonesia, from Sweden, from the United States, because people wanted to know about us. And I make it very easy in the learning. And this is just a little bit of one of my cultures that I used to give at City College. Therefore, Caminos has a Latin American invitation with 2 artists. One of them half Peruvian, another one is from Brazil. Then we have the expressions of the young Mexican Americans that no longer have contact with Mexico, like my 2 kids, Manuel and Annette. And then we have also the young girl who did the photography, that's Amy. And then we have that woman here, the one that is doing different paintings about Mexico and everything, and you can see all the expressions of different expressions. But no, you are going to know that it is a Latin exhibition. There's no African exhibition in there. There's nothing about Asian exhibition in there. We know there's nothing about modern American art in there. We know that it's not French art, because everybody has a way to express themselves. And one of the most exciting expressions is people with a Latin last name. It is exciting, but still the American public and different communities is learning about it. It's beginning to learn about it, even though it's been going for a long time. I just find it, from the Chicano side of me, I find it very exciting. I like it when there's pressure. I like the challenge. We're willing to take the risk. We are willing to walk places. And these are men and women of different professions. One of our young Chicanas, she became in the cabinet of Obama, the Minister of Labor, Hilda Solis, Chicana, and from Honduras, and all the way to there. So that means that the Chicano movement has been successful. And of course, in the Republican Party, which is a reality, they have conservative Latin Americans in their invitations, okay? So you make your choices when it deals with that social aspect. As for expression, if you go to a Mexican restaurant, be ready for Mexican culture. If you go to a Mexican barrio, Mexican-American barrio in East LA, in El Paso, Texas, in Oxnard, be ready to see a variety of expressions by the Mexican-American people, the way they dress themselves, the way that they see themselves. The Mexican population right now in Carpinteria, they're watching a soccer game. And the Mexican-American kids are watching the Dallas Cowboys against the San Francisco 49ers. Okay? It's very simple to explain. And sometimes those two sides, they don't delve into one another. However, my argument is that soccer playing makes us international. I don't deal just with Mexico soccer. I like to watch French soccer. But in the United States, we're not used to that. Oh, those names are too weird. What do you mean Ronaldo, Cristiano? What do you mean Pelé? What is that? Well, it's because you're not into soccer. We are more used to, other things. So you can see that difference in there. The Mexican-American kids want to be socially visible. They want to be accepted. The Mexican population, they want to be culturally visible. And they don't care that much to be socially part of anything that they don't want to. As for myself, I'm going to watch 2 soccer games today. Okay? Then I'm going to watch 2 American football games. I'm following the Dodgers, because that's what we Chicanos choose. We like everything. We delve into anything that we know is going to give us more knowledge, more and more knowledge. I deal with a Jewish community there in Chapala Street in Santa Barbara, my friends there. I deal with African American friends, Native American friends. And by the way, the women Chicana movement is the biggest now. The Chicano movement is about 75% women. Women are running the show, and the activism of the Latino people in this country. Women. My respects to that. Oh yeah, you go to a meeting, you're going to see women all over the place. Mexican Americans, just a few guys in there. Because women are, going places that we as men, we have decided to take a little break. I don't know how long. Any questions, anybody, in dealing with what I spoke about, and also eventually when you come into the gallery, you are going to see the images that I hope you do. Chicano, it's a word that started in El Paso, Texas, because when you live in Juarez, Mexico, okay, you have a specific name. But we in Juarez, Mexico, where I grew up, across the border, when we knew that a guy had an accent and he couldn't speak good Spanish, we call him Chicano, okay? Or Pocho. Pocho is a Mexican-American that is losing his culture. But those Mexicans that were a little bit more brave and, they were involved in different things, they were Chicanos, which is a combination of Mexicano, okay? M-E, and instead of an X, you put a C-H. Mexicano, instead of Mexicano, okay? Mexicano. And I was very familiar with the word because I grew up with that word in Juarez, Mexico. I was there until I was 13, and then I went back until I was 16. And we said, oh, these are Chicanos. So when they start using it in LA, especially by people from Texas, it just caught up. And the reason is because it's the language of the kids of the streets. It's the language of the popular people. Just like in New York and the United States using the word Yankee, some Americans take objection to that, but some people take it with a lot of pride, depending what is that you want to express. Same thing. Just like with African Americans right now, the word Negro is no longer popular because to them they rather be African Americans. But in some parts of the South, they still use the word Negro, and it's a fact of life. So Chicano is a word that comes out of the streets. It's not a race, it's a state of mind. It's a state of mind. I am Mexican, as proud as I can be. Hablar con la gente en español. I love the music, I love the food and everything. And then I like the American side of me. How can I be unthankful? I love everything that I feel that we can achieve in the United States of America. I think that we can achieve as much as we can. And that's the American side of me. But also there's that concept of unity and try to do the best we can through education. Thank you very much, and you're welcome to come inside if you wish to, or if...
Let me at least take them.
We did it.
Well, we have to leave 4 out. 4 out. We have to leave 4 out. Okay. Thank you.
Did we do something for First Friday?
Yes, I just found out that Chris did
Beautiful day.
Yes. Oh, that was for First Friday?
yes, because she was just talking about.
Buenos días.
Yeah, no, I didn't know. You know, I
I
know.
like your outfit.
Thank you, thank you.
These were given to me by my mother-in-law before I got married 50 years ago.
Oh, sí, 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 yo sé.
Strung on this year. She came from Hawaii. She came from back. She didn't know I existed. She came back from Hawaii. Future husband at the time announces that we were getting married. She lived in.
Excuse me.
No, she went on a vacation.
Excuse me.
On vacation. Oh. First the order before that. You did the order? Yeah, the first day I had it. Do you know about you though? No. I call that name.
So, what did your son, you and your son meet you at the airport?
So, and you are?
My name's Ricardo Venegas.
And what are your thoughts?
I thought it's an excellent art exhibit. It makes for a very well thought out point of view in terms of the different identities that many Chicanos, Mexicanos are confronted with when living here in the United States. I think it's a very difficult and challenging ideology of Chicano living in the U.S. and I think Manuel makes that connection, that ideology that he explains in terms of the recent immigration population being able to fit in with the U.S. Way of thinking, the politics, and the art that he shows here with the different artists. I think really expresses that really nice in that we get to see the different views coming out with the art. We get to see the different politics on the street, the different politics in the educational system, the immigration political system right now. So you get to see that through the art. And Manuel is able to explain and connect those things very well. And I think the art that is being exhibited speaks on those different ideas of what does it mean to be a Mexican American in the U.S. What does it mean to be a Chicano? What does it mean to be Hispanic for those that do accept Hispanic? Which, as he explained, it's a recently invented word that came via the politics of the Nixon administration. A lot of the mainstream community does not know that, and sometimes you hear that come out in the in the press and the media, well, Hispanics this, Hispanics that, but they don't understand that, especially in the Southwest, the word Hispanic doesn't mean anything. It doesn't identify with them. And Manuel very effectively explains that through the art. So,
Well, thank you very much. And your name again was?
Ricardo Venegas.
I like to do things like this by throwing different things. You can see the Mexican aspect of ancient Mexico, but then my kids are a lot into this and geometry, like Frank Stella and other geometric artists that I like to do that. But this, I say that this is a Chicano painting. Even the title, Tears for Ixtla. Her name is Ixtlacihuatl, and this guy is Popocatépetl. But we Chicanos like to cut the names in half. So instead, Ixtlacihuatl says Ixtla. Okay, and that's a Chicano way of saying things. Like me, they call me Meño. Meño is a Chicano way of saying Manuel. Manny is in English, but Meño is the Chicano thing that we use in El Paso, Texas, okay? Roberto, we call him Beto, etc. And this is a very interesting series of paintings by Joao from Brazil, and he likes to paint the naive style, and you could say a combination of what children do and uneducated grandmothers, that, you know, Grandma Moses and all that, and that's supposed to be over there, Rio, and one of the natives, and his way of trying something different, but he says that he just enjoys painting. Yeah, and of course, later you can see the drawings of Frank that is very, very barrio art in love with ancient Mexico, and you know, it's behind bars, so he has a lot of time to do it. I wish I had that time, but he's very good with the Mexican realism that I speak about. But I like to delve into American abstractions. I like to do that because that makes it more, yeah.
I have one question about the square on top. The painting is spectacular.
Thank you.
How?
If I would have done a Mexican painting, if this would have been a Mexican painting, this would have been a different type of design, and this would have a face, and there would have been two volcanoes outside of Mexico City. The two volcanoes, one volcano looks like a woman, and the other volcano looks like a crying man. That's why you see this. Yeah, if you go to Mexico City, you see it. Okay. But to make it on this side of the border with more modernism, the pressures that modernism gives us, okay, modernism, being modern, being American, I like to delve into geometry to make it interesting. And this could be a pyramid, or it could be just a break of space, but that's my influence of American painters. Abstractions, texture, you see the texture? Making it very different, but this is an emotional painting of tears. That's why I put a dark background so people can relate to this man crying for his woman Ixtla. That's why it's called Tears for Ixtla, and he has a mask of shame because they killed her because of him. He was trying to run away with her, and they killed her. So he has a mask of sadness, and that's why you see a lot of dark colors. But then I like to delve in what I learned from Jackson Pollock. I'm sure you can see it here. I don't hide the fact that I like the geometry of New York artists because I've been there and I've seen it, and I don't like to let go of any art. Any art that influences me, I'll accept it.